$4.5 million. That is roughly what it costs to own a Bugatti Tourbillon before anyone even opens the options list. And once that list is opened, the number only climbs higher. This is exactly what true luxury looks like in the modern era. Not simply expensive, not simply fast, genuinely, mathematically, almost completely out of reach for nearly everyone on the planet. Only 250 of these cars will ever exist, total, forever, not per year. If someone wants one today and is not already known to Bugatti, they are almost certainly too late. Let us talk about why that matters, because the Tourbillon is a masterclass in what separates a merely expensive car from a true luxury object. Start with the name itself. Bugatti did not choose anything aggressive or sporty. They named this car after a tourbillon, a mechanism found inside the finest mechanical watches on Earth, invented over 2 centuries ago to counteract the pull of gravity on delicate moving parts, keeping time perfectly accurate no matter how the watch is oriented. That is not a typical car name. That is a name borrowed directly from haute horlogerie, the world of elite Swiss watchmaking. That single choice reveals how Bugatti wants this car to be seen, not as a machine built for speed, but as a piece of art that happens to also be a car. Step inside, and the watchmaking references are not just symbolic, they are physical. The entire instrument cluster is fully mechanical, crafted from titanium, hand-assembled by Concepto, a Swiss watchmaking specialist. Real gears turn behind the glass. Real mechanical movement drives the display. There are no digital screens pretending to look analog, only genuine moving parts, visible the same way someone might admire the inner workings of a fine watch through its caseback. The speedometer and tachometer needles are even shaped and positioned to resemble Even the steering wheel reflects this same obsession. Instead of rotating as one solid piece the way every ordinary car does, only the outer rim turns, while the center hub remains completely fixed in place. Why bother with that engineering complexity? Simply so the driver can always see that watch-inspired instrument cluster clearly, no matter which direction the wheel happens to be turned. That is an enormous amount of engineering effort spent purely in service of a single aesthetic and experiential detail. That, in many ways, is the very definition of luxury. Solving a problem nobody actually asked to have solved, purely because the result feels more refined. There is a center touchscreen as well, a genuine first for the brand. But even this concession bends to Bugatti's philosophy of timelessness, because the screen retracts fully into the dashboard whenever it is not in use. Bugatti did not want a piece of screen technology, something destined to look outdated within a few short years, to ever compromise a design meant to remain remarkable decades from now. Now, consider the engine, because even here, the luxury story is not really about raw speed. It is about restraint and deliberate choice. Nearly every other hypercar manufacturer chasing enormous power figures has turned towards smaller, turbocharged engines, heavily assisted by electrification, simply because that is the more efficient and more practical route. Bugatti looked at that exact same trend and chose the opposite direction entirely. They built a brand new, naturally aspirated 8.3-liter V16 alongside Cosworth, with no turbochargers whatsoever, because a naturally aspirated engine responds instantly to the throttle and revs with a purity that forced induction can never fully replicate. That decision introduced enormous complexity. It would have been simpler and cheaper to just turbocharge a smaller engine instead. But true luxury is often the deliberate choice to do something the harder way, purely because that harder path produces a far better feeling. That engine alone produces roughly 1,000 horsepower, revving all the way to 9,000 RPM, an almost unheard of figure for an engine of this size. 3 separate electric motors contribute another roughly 800 horsepower on top of that, bringing the combined total to 1,800 horsepower. The resulting acceleration numbers are almost absurd to say aloud. 0 to 60 arriving in roughly 1.8 seconds, with a top speed exceeding 277 miles per hour. Yet notice something important here. Bugatti rarely leads with those numbers. They feel almost like an afterthought in how the brand discusses this car publicly. The marketing campaigns, the documentary series Bugatti released chronicling its development, and the way engineers describe the car all center on craftsmanship, artistry, and emotion, rather than lap times or horsepower charts. That distinction is entirely deliberate. Any manufacturer with enough resources can chase bigger numbers. Only a small handful of brands on Earth can convince someone to spend $4.5 million on an object defined more by its story and artistry than by a spec sheet alone. That story extends into the physical construction of the car as well. The chassis is built from advanced carbon composite, incorporating three-dimensional printed structural elements developed with assistance from artificial intelligence. The suspension components were designed in partnership with Divergent Technologies, resulting in parts 45% lighter than those found on the outgoing Chiron. None of this is visible to a passerby admiring the car outside a hotel entrance. Nobody can see the three-dimensional printed suspension geometry hidden beneath the bodywork. It exists purely because Bugatti's engineers refuse to accept anything less than exceptional, even in places nobody will ever actually see. That too is a genuine form of luxury, obsessive quality applied even where there is no audience present to appreciate it. Even the steering wheel reflects this same obsession. Instead of rotating as one solid piece the way every ordinary car does, only the outer rim turns, while the center hub remains completely fixed in place. Why bother with that engineering complexity? Simply so the driver can always see that watch-inspired instrument cluster clearly, no matter which direction the wheel happens to be turned. That is an enormous amount of engineering effort spent purely in service of a single aesthetic and experiential detail. That, in many ways, is the very definition of luxury. Solving a problem nobody actually asked to have solved, purely because the result feels more refined. There is a center touchscreen as well, a genuine first for the brand. But even this concession bends to Bugatti's philosophy of timelessness, because the screen retracts fully into the dashboard whenever it is not in use. Bugatti did not want a piece of screen technology, something destined to look outdated within a few short years, to ever compromise a design meant to remain remarkable decades from now. Then there is the interior finishing itself, fully bespoke to each individual customer, tailored specifically to their personal preferences, using materials and detailing that pass through Bugatti's own atelier rather than any standardized production line. It is unlikely that any two Tourbillon will ever be finished in quite the same way. So what does the Tourbillon actually represent in the end? It is not simply a fast car wearing an enormous price tag. It stands as proof that at the absolute pinnacle of the market, luxury stops being about horsepower figures or acceleration times, and instead becomes about something far harder to quantify: obsessive craftsmanship, genuine rarity, and a story so carefully constructed that owning the object means owning a piece of that story as well.